let's get started here. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon now. Thank you for joining us for this Lunch and Learn presentation. Our goal is, as we move forward, to do one of these a month, and it'll be the first Tuesday of every month. That's our target. It'll be around the lunch hour. Everyone that registers will get emailed a copy of the presentation as well, so you can check it out, and we'll put it on YouTube and on social media for you guys to share and check out. Now, we will ask that you hold your questions generally until the end. If there's something urgent, you can send us a message through the chat. We'll be paying attention to the chat the whole time. But for those of you who don't know who we are, I'm Anthony, and this is Marissa. Marissa is our nutritionist at Pittsburgh Fit, and she is a wonder. So today we're going to talk about the meatless athlete. Again, put your information in the chat, and we will be happy to answer every question that you have. All right. Ooh, there we go. All right, guys, I'm going to let Marissa take it away.
Hey, guys. Again, my name's Marissa for anyone who doesn't know me. And so this presentation kind of got the idea from, if you watch Netflix at all, I think about a year or two ago, they came out with a documentary called The Game Changers. And it was all about high-level athletes who switched from a meat diet to a vegetarian or vegan diet and kind of the results they saw from it. And really, we have a lot of people at this gym, too, that follow a vegetarian and vegan diet. So being properly educated on it just seemed like something really important that we should do.
Yeah, and being a vegetarian and vegan can be a great diet. And the point we're trying to make, too, is that any tips that help a vegetarian or vegan help someone who's on a whole food plant-based diet, which we'll get into that a little bit more, but just any tips and tricks to consume more vegetables without over-consuming carbohydrates is going to be a game changer for you. See what I did there? All right, guys.
So, vegetarian versus vegan. Ultimately, vegetarian is kind of the umbrella. There's multiple different types of vegetarians, and vegan is really just one of those types. But when you have a vegan, you're going to avoid all animal products. So that's no meat, fish, poultry, dairy, eggs, meat-based products, anything like that. So you're getting rid of all of that in your diet. Whereas a vegetarian, you have a little bit more wiggle room and you eat a little bit more food. So vegan is super strict compared to a vegetarian. And some of the most common types of vegetarian is going to be your lacto-ovo vegetarian, which again, that's no meat, but will eat dairy products and eggs. And then there's also a lacto-vegetarian, which only includes dairy, no eggs. And then an ovo, which includes eggs, but no dairy. So the two probably best transition types of vegetarian is going to be your pescatarian, because they still eat fish, or a flexible vegetarian. So a flexible vegetarian is kind of someone who makes up their own rules ultimately when it comes to a vegetarian diet, and that's totally okay. So if you're someone who has thought about becoming a vegetarian and you tried going into it cold turkey, just cutting out everything, probably didn't go over too well for you. So just like any type of lift or workout, you're going to want to start off slow and you want to go one thing at a time. So starting off as a flexible vegetarian is super beneficial. So week 1 to 3, just cut out red meat. And then on week 4, now that you've cut out red meat, week 4, start only eating meat 3 to 4 days a week. And then when you get to week 6, get down to 1 day. And then switch to a pescatarian and only do fish. So taking these little steps is kind of what's going to make you pretty much can get to a vegetarian diet without failure.
Yeah, we talk about it in the gym a lot, right? So if you want to squat 300 pounds, you don't just start squatting 300 pounds tomorrow, right? There's a slow progressive increase. So you do squats, you do lunges, you do deadlifts, right? You work on the whole system, and consistency is going to be more beneficial here than having a perfect day 1 day a week, or a perfect day 1 day a month. So the more consistently you guys can hold on to these habits, the better. And that's the way that we treat nutrition coaching here. It's one step at a time, moving towards the final habit that you want.
So now we're going to talk about the benefits of a whole food diet. And the reason we're doing a whole food diet and not vegetarian or vegan, because ultimately a vegetarian vegan diet, if you do it the right way, ends up being a whole food diet, which is what every person wants. Whether you're eating meat or not, you want a whole food diet. And just quickly, what a whole food diet is, it kind of limits a lot of animal products. It focuses on plants, including vegetables, fruits, whole grains, beans, seeds, and nuts, and that should make up majority of what you eat. It excludes refined foods like added sugars, white flours, and all kind of processed foods. There's so many health benefits to a whole foods diet. So it's going to lower your risk of diabetes, heart disease, cancer, hypertension, pretty much any disease it's going to lower the chances of. And then it's also going to increase your energy. Studies show you live longer, healthier cholesterol levels, healthier skin, nails, lower blood pressure, lower BMI, just all around health is better when you follow a whole foods diet.
And you tend to be more in touch with your body because you're preparing food. So you have like a more emotional relationship to that food. So when you grow a vegetable, you're much more likely to eat it than if you buy a vegetable smoothie from, say, a juice bar, right? Different levels of consumption and mindfulness. And being mindful is a big part of why being vegetarian and vegan is so important.
And when you follow a whole food diet, you're not going to get all those ingredients that you don't even know what they are. Mm-hmm. You're going to it's going to be natural and in turn just way more nutrient rich and everything. So when it comes to eating meat, there is some environmental and ethical impacts that are kind of crazy. And it's something that we do kind of all need to think about, because I do eat meat still, but there are some huge things that need to be considered when you are consuming meat. So first, it takes 25 gallons of water to grow 1 pound of wheat. However, it takes 5,000 gallons of water to grow 1 pound of beef. So that's a huge difference. So plant-based protein there is going to take up much less water than the cows will. And then another really important thing to look at is land. So 30% of the Earth's landmass is dedicated to raising animals for food, which is crazy, which means we're getting rid of forest and we're contaminating water with their waste and all that stuff just so we can eat meat, which kind of seems
unfair.
Yeah, it doesn't seem totally right. And then also 18% of greenhouse gases are attributed to livestock, which I actually didn't even realize that until kind of doing my research. So, I mean, we're already very worried about global warming, and turns out the consumption of meat isn't helping it either. And then ethically, you just kind of got to think about, one, it's unnecessary killing these poor animals, because technically it's not easy, but you can get every single nutrient from plant-based foods. Mm-hmm. And also when you think about how much grain we give to these animals, it's about 40% of the world's grain. You kind of think about all the people who can't get access to food or don't have food.
Or can't afford,
we could feed them with some of that. And then lastly, it takes 2.2 calories of energy to produce 1 calorie of a plant protein, whereas it takes 25 calories of energy to produce 1 calorie of a meat protein. So it's just a lot more intensive to get protein from our meat rather than getting it just from plants.
Yeah, no, it's very American to consume meat often and regularly. That's an unusual thing for the rest of the world. So it's important to remember that no matter if you want to go vegetarian or vegan, eating less animal products and more vegetables is going to be good for you and good for everyone else. You don't have to make the jump to vegetarian or vegan. But this transition from where you are to eating slightly better over time is going to help you, is going to help the people around you on the actual planet, which is really exciting too. So you get healthier, the planet gets healthier. It's a win-win-win.
So with anything, there's benefits, but then there's also kind of some issues with a vegetarian vegan diet. So one huge thing, it's going to increase your chances of a micronutrient deficiency.
So micronutrients are your vitamins and your minerals. So macro would be protein, carbs, fats, and this is vitamin A, B, C, right? All those. And then you have things like iron and calcium and magnesium.
It can be hard to sustain and expensive, because you are getting rid of big food groups, and a lot of cheap food, you really can't, it's either not going to be vegan friendly or it's going to be some kind of animal product. So again, health issues can arise if it's not done properly. There's an imbalance of macronutrients, which, like Anthony said, that's your fat, protein, and carbs. So what happens a lot of times with vegan and vegetarians who aren't properly educated, there's a huge overconsumption of carbs and fat and way underconsumption of protein, which is literally the exact opposite of what you want. And most vegetarians / vegan proteins are considered incomplete, which is also a really big issue. And that's something we'll go over in a little bit. But if you notice, the highlighted reasons all really have to do with education. If you try to go vegetarian, vegan, and you're not properly educated, you're going to run into a lot of health issues, and they can really be dangerous health issues as well.
Yeah, and there's a few ways to hedge your bets against this, right? Some people have been lifelong vegetarians. They were born that way, raised that way. And some of you are friends with those people. So one of the ways you can make this transition is have a friend help you guide you through this diet. Go over to their house one night for dinner, and then they come over to your house for dinner, and now you're prepping for them. You could grab a nutrition coach. I might know one to help you ease that transition. The education piece is just something that takes a time investment, and just like learning every new skill, you should be patient with yourself, set up a plan, and follow it nice and slowly over time to make sure that you're the most successful that you can be.
So some really important nutrients to consider when you are following a vegan or vegetarian diet is going to be your protein, iron, zinc, calcium, B12, omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin A, and vitamin D. Again, because when you're cutting out specific food groups and food items, trying to get all the proper nutrients in is not easy. So there's some really common signs of deficiencies in those macro micronutrients, and the two top are going to be lethargy and weakness. So if you notice you switch to a vegan or vegetarian diet and you just feel tired, weak, achy, and even paying attention to your hair and your skin are really important things that are common signs of a B12 deficiency, a protein deficiency, an iron deficiency. These are all very common in vegans and vegetarians. And actually, when I worked in a hospital, many people came in because they were trying to follow a vegan and vegetarian diet, but didn't do it right. And you get sick. You don't feel good. You feel awful. So if you're not educated on how to get all the proper nutrients in, you're not going to feel good. And it's actually going to have the opposite benefits that you would if you did it right.
Yeah. Now the tricky part here is that if you make a transition from one diet to another, the faster you make that transition, the more you'll feel things like lethargy and weakness generally. So people try keto diet. So they have a 2-week loading period where they feel crappy because their body is trying to make adjustments. Or you can't get enough nutrients in you because you can't eat enough volume. You might be eating the same amount of foods, but you have to actually eat more and bigger servings because vitamins and minerals might be dense in these foods, but the energy that you need might be a little less dense. So there's a thin line between a transition and getting used to it and a bad feeling because you're missing out on something vital. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go.
So you can definitely get protein from vegetarian and vegan sources. There's actually a lot. However, the one thing I do want you to pay attention to is the serving size, which is 50 grams. And some of these items you're not really ever going to eat 50 grams of. So trying to get enough protein on these types of diets can be hard, not impossible by any means. You can be on a high protein diet as a vegetarian or vegan, but it's just going to require a little bit more thought and a little bit more time and effort. And the other thing that's super important, if you're thinking about this, is all vegetables do have protein in them. It does require a lot of protein, but the whole goal is to eat whole foods. So if you're eating a whole foods diet, you're probably eating a lot of vegetables. Yeah. So every meal, you're probably getting 5 to 8 grams of protein just from vegetables because you're filling that plate up with as much vegetables as possible, honestly. And just as like a rule of thumb for anyone trying to hit a protein goal, you'd want to be about 1 gram per kilogram of protein per body weight. So
for a lower limit.
Yeah, for your lower limit of protein. So if you do your weight in pounds, you just divide that by 2.2, and then whatever number you get, that's what you would want your lowest number of protein to be.
Yeah, no, that's a lot lower than traditional medicine might tell you, right? Most people say 1 gram per pound, and that's double the amount of protein. So remember, we're not trying to shoot for how many can I eat? It's how many do I need to continue on going? So for most people, you're looking at 50 to 80 grams of protein, depending on how tall you are. And that does play a factor. So thank you for coming into the questions. And hi, that is a great question. We will answer your question in a hot second about supplements. But see all the numbers here. One of the biggest misconceptions we hear is that people come in and say, well, I can get all my protein from broccoli. And that's true. And we've seen some advertisements for different diet programs about this. They say you can get 100 grams of protein from broccoli, and they're totally right. But you have to eat 500 grams or 5,000 grams of broccoli to meet that requirement. So if you get 2 grams for a serving of broccoli, and then you get 2 grams from cauliflower, and you have some nut butter, and you put some seeds in a shake. Right now you're talking 5, 10, 15, 20 grams per meal. So I don't want to talk your heads off. I'm going to let Marissa take this away here.
So supplements in this type of diet typically they're always necessary, and they're actually going to be helpful just in general too. So if you struggle to get protein in as a vegetarian, whey protein isolate whey is a dairy, but when you get the isolate brand, they pretty much take out most of the lactose. So it's ultimately pretty much dairy free. So whey protein isolate for vegetarians works. And then vegans, I've heard the pea protein tastes the best. And that's totally animal free, nothing you have to worry about there. Mm-hmm. But this is the most important part when following this type of diet is the supplements you're going to have to take. So B12 comes from animal sources only. So if you're on this type of diet, you're literally not getting any B12. Yep. So it's so important that B12 is something you take and really focus on. And the kind you want to take is I have trouble saying this, I think cinchocobalamin. And this is the man-made B12. And it's just better digested and absorbed. So that's what you typically recommend. And then you want to take a vitamin D and calcium. Vitamin D helps with the absorption of calcium. So you want to take those. Typically, your calcium will have vitamin D in it. And then for vegetarians, you want to take a fish oil, and vegans an algae oil. And the reason for this is, especially if you're a vegetarian who's cutting out all of your seafood, these are the DHA and EPA, which comes from fish, is really important omega-3s, which you need for heart health, cognitive function, and you're not going to get that if you're not eating that type of food. And then recently, a lot of studies has been showing that vegans have really low zinc levels. So that's another vitamin that you'd really want to be taking, especially if you're vegan. However, you can kind of make this slightly easier and take a multivitamin, but the thing with multivitamins is they're not always absorbed as great as if you just take the individual nutrient by itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when you look at a normal human being who isn't a vegetarian or vegan, if you skip over B12 because they're going to be eating animal products, if you live in Pittsburgh, you should be supplementing vitamin D either with a supplement or a food source, right? There's not enough sun in the city to create the transformation, the enzymatic process needed for vitamin D. So if you live in Pittsburgh, I'm going to drive that home. Now, if you're anyone else, unless you eat a lot of fish or algae type products, you should probably be taking an omega-3 fatty acid. So again, we're looking for a whole food plant-based diet, and all of these apply to everyone. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is that there's a lot of research with COVID that vitamin D and zinc supplements are used to kind of improve the outcomes. I don't know where we are with the efficacy of it.
Zinc, I know zinc is really, really big on immune health.
Yeah.
So zinc's just important in general.
Yep. Right. So in these crazy times, as crazy as they are, it's important to pay attention to those numbers. But B12 is kind of non-negotiable here. Yeah. And then everything else, if you eat a good diet, you can do that. And I've heard good things about turmeric root for vitamin or for omega-3s as well. Mm-hmm. And turmeric root, Marissa and I have talked about this a lot. When dietitians don't know what's going on and they can't solve it, they're like, try turmeric root and ginger.
Yeah, literally everything.
Yeah, those things are great, especially you could do like some fermented ginger and different ways to tackle those.
So this is another really big key feature of the vegan or vegetarian diet. So most plant sources are not considered complete protein. So a complete protein contains all 9 essential amino acids. And the reason you need a protein to be complete is because, or essential acid or complete protein, is that's how you maintain and even build your muscle. So there are 2 sources that are considered complete, and that's quinoa and soy. However, they're still low values of complete proteins. So if you were just eating quinoa and soy and you weren't really worried about making complete proteins anywhere else, you would be able to maintain muscle, but you would not be able to build muscle. So these essential amino acids have to come from the diet. So you kind of have to create them because your body cannot make them. So I kind of look at essential acids or essential amino acids kind of like as a puzzle. And when you complete that puzzle, that's your protein. So you need the whole puzzle in order to actually see what the picture is. So complementary proteins are how you're going to make a complete protein. And it's really not hard to do. So you can do a grain and a seed. You can do dairy and beans, dairy and grains, grains and seeds. So literally you can combine so many things to make a complete protein, but I can't say it enough how important it is that you make complete proteins, because without them, you are not going to be able to build or even maintain your muscle. And that's where a lot of vegetarians and vegans go wrong, because they just cut out the meat and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, I'm getting protein in, but you're not. If you don't do it right, you're going to be protein deficient.
Your question about supplementation, we're going to talk about a little bit here. So you can supplement with a powder, or you can supplement with a food choice. And our recommendation is always going to be supplementing with a whole food choice and a complementary proteins. So Marissa put together this really awesome chart here. So like you have pumpkin seeds and chickpeas, those two together make a complete protein. So as a protein supplement, now you have roasted chickpeas with pumpkin seeds, and you put some seasoning over top of it, right? As we move through like sesame seeds and peas, falafel with tahini dip. I mean, tahini is delicious. And of course, the easiest one of all time, a nice peanut butter sandwich. And what you can do too, if you want to keep your carbs a little bit lower, use half a piece of bread and just smear it with peanut butter, because peanut butter is amazing.
Then there's a few more examples. So rice and beans, anytime you eat Mexican or corn and beans, it doesn't take much to make a complete protein, but it does require you to pay attention to the meals you're making and the meals you're eating. So it's great. You don't have to have a complete protein at every meal, but I highly, highly suggest it, because again, if you're just having like the minimal amount of complete proteins, you can maintain, but you're not going to gain. And I think everybody's goal here, especially, working out, lifting heavy weights, is you want to gain muscle. So getting those complete proteins in at every single meal is really important, and it doesn't have to be hard.
Yeah, and it's not just gaining muscle too, right? Your body uses protein for a ton of different functions. So just continuous high quality functioning immune system, high quality functioning enzymatic processes, like having all of those amino acids are critical.
So for the average diet, so if you're eating meat, typically the macronutrient distribution, so again, your macronutrients, protein, carbs, and fat, is going to be 40% of your calories are going to come from carbs, 30% are going to come from protein, and then the other 30% are going to come from fat. However, for a vegetarian and vegan, that's a little bit harder. And the reason for that is because most of your protein sources are going to also have carbs. Whereas if you just eat chicken, you're literally just getting protein. So for a vegetarian and vegan, you're going to want to hit like 45 to 65% carbs. And it's probably going to be higher than the 45 because, again, every protein source just about is going to bring some carbs with it. And then the fat is going to be the 20 to 35%. And then the protein is where you're going to really vary. And depending on pretty much how much you can prepare your meals is going to be how high you can get your protein. Because in order to get high protein from these types of diets, you do have to pay attention, and you do have to kind of plan out your days a little bit more than the average person. So you can still definitely shoot for the 40, 30, 30 that the average meat eater would do, but it's just going to be a little harder, but that's okay. Whatever you can do,
Right. Yeah. So we talk about number of calories. So in the average, the meat eater, 40% is, on a 2,000 calorie diet, that's 800 calories in carbohydrates. Right. Then we're doing 6 and 6, 600 protein, 600 fat. So that looks like a pretty evenly distributed plate. And then when you go to vegetarian and vegan, basically your whole plate turns into a pile of vegetables, and then you cook them with fat. So now you just have to make sure that those vegetables fit that complementary protein, the vegetables, the grains, and the non-animal products.
All right, so now this is kind of the fun part. So again, Game Changers is the Netflix documentary. And so it follows the life of like multiple Olympic athletes and just high like lifters. I think there's
a world record power lifter.
Yeah.
There's some professional football players.
Yeah. And they all change to a non-meat diet, and then they all do better. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like after you watch this, you'd be like, oh, I feel like I should really be cutting out meat altogether. Like, this seems like the best thing in the whole entire world. Why am I not doing this? But then you kind of have to look into it and see some of the other things in it.
Right. So we call this sensationalism in journalism, right? So it's a really good piece of information, and they really do cover a lot of good science, but you need to know a little bit more about the documentary to get the actual down to the facts of it, right?
So the one really great thing about this documentary, it brought so much awareness to the benefits of a vegetarian and vegan diet, because there really is a tremendous amount. Like, it's a great thing to follow if you can. And then also it proved that you can train at a super high level while consuming a vegetarian diet. Because I know a lot of people think like, oh, you'll never get the amount of protein you need on a vegetarian vegan diet. That's not true. You totally can. So I think it really just, the awareness factor from this video was really, really important.
And they showed you a bunch of really delicious looking food on top of that. So, I mean, anyone would dig into a big bowl of fresh cooked veggies with a bunch of different colors. It just looked really appealing.
So then there's some downfalls of the documentary. So one, it was a very unrealistic representation of the population. I think there was like 2 Olympic athletes. There was 1 world champion lifter.
Right.
So they were all just really, really high level, which most of us can't really compare ourselves to them. So that was kind of hard to see. And then also there was a really big bias. So the people who actually made the video and sponsored it own an organic pea protein company. So you would obviously, they're trying to get more people to have pea protein, and you're probably not going to have pea protein unless you're vegan or vegetarian.
Yep.
So this video definitely convinced people to do that as well.
Yeah, and in normal scientific research, when they present some findings, they have to disclose bias first so that you as the viewer are aware of who is doing the research that you're buying into. So not that it sways the actual results, because it doesn't change it at all, but it does let you know that they may have a secondary motive, or their results can be presented in a certain way. But it's just important to know that about the documentary.
And then the other thing in the documentary, so every athlete improved, but they didn't show what the athletes were eating prior to switching the diet. And like we talked about already, if you're vegetarian, vegan, most likely you're at a whole foods diet. So again, so many benefits to that. So if they went from eating like crap to just a whole food diet and still ate meat, would they have seen the same results? We don't know. And then another thing, during the movie, they said that plant protein is better than animal protein, and that's not really true. I mean, You could say they're the same, but one's not necessarily better than the other.
Yeah, a protein molecule is a protein molecule,
right?
Pure protein molecule.
And then the last thing, which this I see a lot on social media as well, they said a peanut butter sandwich has the same amount of protein as like 3 ounces of chicken, which is going to give you like 20 grams of protein. So if you're getting 20 grams of protein from peanut butter, you're also getting almost 40 grams of fat. So you can't say that's the same thing, because with the chicken, you're getting 20 grams of protein and that's it. When the peanut butter, you're getting 20 grams, but 40 grams of fat, which is already almost to your allotted number for the day. Yeah. So when you're on social media and looking at serving sizes of protein and stuff like that, you really want to pay attention, do your own research as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, most people I feel like want to make this switch for health reasons and for weight loss reasons, right? They can both be one and the same. But if you just replace your chicken or replace your protein source with a vegetarian source like a peanut butter sandwich, now all of a sudden you're eating 120 extra calories every time you try and go into that protein serving. So it's very easy to actually increase your calorie consumption by being a lazy vegan or a lazy vegetarian, or just not being aware of what's going on. So I agree with Marissa wholeheartedly that education is the core of this problem.
So the biggest question, I feel like, especially after watching that documentary and just talking all about this, is should you go vegetarian or vegan? So my take on it is it healthy and beneficial? Absolutely. And I do still eat meat, but I do recommend watching your meat intake and at least lowering it. What you really should be doing is making your vegetables the main part of your meal. I feel like typically the meat is the big part of your meal, or what you eat the most of, when really you want it to be the vegetables. So another thing, if you're a very serious athlete, I think being a vegan is slightly...
It's suboptimal.
Yeah. Vegetarian, you can absolutely do it and it wouldn't take up your whole life, but being vegan is going to be a lot more work. And if you're working out hours a day, it might not be as beneficial.
Right. These professional athletes, all of them had food preparation handled outside of their own behavior. So the football player, his wife cooked vegetarian food for all of them, and that was her full-time job. Right. So it may be a little unrealistic to try and pursue a career and have kids and have to shovel the snow off the driveway and how to get squirrels out of your house because your dogs are too lazy to do it, as meat eaters, by the way. Yeah, so I think we're going in the right direction. So if you guys have some questions, throw them into the chat here. But I would like to take a second to answer this first question. So can you comment on supplemental protein, whey, or pea for vegans? So I'm not a vegetarian vegan. You're not a vegetarian or vegan. And whey protein gives me GI distress almost every single time.
So whey protein, if it bothers people, because I hear that all the time, 1, you might not be drinking enough water. And 2, There's lactose in it, but if you get whey protein isolate, it's almost all removed from it. So typically vegetarians can do whey protein isolate and be fine. However, vegans obviously cannot. So pea protein is a really good option. And then spirulina, it's like an algae powder, and it has a lot of protein in it. And you can put it in your drinks and waters. Not going to taste great, but it's just strictly protein, and it's vegan friendly as well.
Yeah, so my personal feelings are that I stay away from whey because even isolate, I can get inflamed from it. So it's just something that I try to stay away from if possible.
All right. So the next question is,
Steve, how's it going, Steve?
when to consume the majority of your protein. Okay, so after you work out, especially if you lift weights, you have a 3-hour time span where it's going to be most beneficial to consume your protein. That's like your anabolic window where you're going to get the most benefit from it. And the closer you can consume it to your workout, the more you're going to get. But you're going to get the most within those 3 windows. And after that, your body's kind of already tried to break down other nutrients to get it because it wasn't kind of given fast enough. So if you can do it within 30 minutes or an hour, that's where you're going to get the most benefit from protein consumption after your workout.
Yeah, so do you know much about Labdoor?
No.
Okay, so Hi just dropped a link in the chat about Labdoor, and I actually buy everything through their site. So Labdoor is a third party that analyzes the contents of supplementation because it's not regulated by the FDA. So this is another thing to consider too. If you're buying a multivitamin and it's not third party certified, you might not be getting any nutrients at all. None. It could be a sugar pill. It could be an animal product pill. So as someone who is an ethical vegan, if you're buying a product expecting it to be vegan vegetarian, it's really important to fulfill your requirements for your ethics, right? So you have to get them checked out. So Labdoor is a site that ranks supplements based on their quality and repetition of quality. So how many times they've been tested over and over to assure that they have in them what they say they have in them.
Another thing to look at for pretty much what he said is for a USP label, because that is a very specific label. Not many supplements have it, but that means they've ultimately been checked for what's in them. Mm-hmm. So it's just another thing that
I believe NSF is a label.
Yeah, NSF.
As well, yeah. So it's important to pay attention to those.
Yeah. GMP. You always want to look for the labels.
Right, and look at what the label actually says, because natural is an unprotected term and it doesn't mean anything.
And some labels, supplement companies can literally just pay for, and it doesn't mean anything. You're just paying to put it on your bottle.
Yeah, so again, we're looking into the specifics, but these are all things people who are on non-vegetarian and vegan diets should do too. As you approach higher level in your quality of life, you want to make sure that what you're putting in your body is improving in quality as well.
To make a complete protein, do you have to... Okay, so the next question is, when making a complete protein, do you have to eat those foods at the same time, or can you eat them one thing at lunch and one thing later in the day? So yeah, you can eat them at any time. Like eat your rice in the morning, eat your beans at night, that's fine. But typically, if you don't plan every meal to be a complete protein, you're gonna have a very, very minimal amount. Because if you're only doing like a little bit at each meal, or you're not making it again a complete protein at each meal, you're just going to be on the lower side of it, which you don't necessarily want to be doing. So trying to plan for every meal to have a complete protein is more beneficial.
So I asked, can you comment on the relative benefits of the oils or fats consumed with veggies? So when you're eating a whole food diet, we're imagining you're consuming foods in combination. Now, there are a lot of different types of oils, and some oils have omega-3s in them, some have omega-6s in them, and you need both. There's just a proper balancing act, right? So when you look at the different vegetables, I would look at how you're cooking them. So quality of fats matters a lot, because if you have, say, butter and you have it's from a cow, did that cow eat wheat or did that cow eat grass? If you buy a piece of fish, is it farm raised on corn or is it raised on algae? So it's what you ate, if that makes sense, right? There's another level of efficiency there. So when you think about canola or olive oil, are you cooking it in a super high heat? If you are, you can burn the oils and make it rancid. It might not taste so bad, but you're ruining the quality of the nutrients inside of that piece of of food. So do you have a preferred cooking oil?
So olive oil is going to be pretty much is the best. I know a lot of people think now coconut oil is the best, but when you heat the coconut oil, it loses a lot of its benefits.
Yep.
So your best and healthiest, most nutrient dense one is going to be your olive oil.
All right, we'll do about another 60 seconds of questions. If you guys have one more round of questions, drop them in the chat. If you guys want to learn more about our nutrition program, go to pittsburghfit.com/nutrition. We'll send the presentations out to you guys. It'll also be posted on our website for you to view and check out on your own time. You can even watch it at double speed if you're extra fancy. But thank you guys so much for joining me.
Thank you.
Yeah, have a great rest of your day. If you guys have any questions, shoot us an email at nutrition@pittsburghfit.com and we'll answer whatever nutrition you have. And if you need a little help,
yeah, I'm here.
Your gal.
Definitely vegetarian, vegan. Again, most important thing is education. So if you ever have any questions or anything like that, I'm here.
Yeah, and we make these presentations based on your questions and feedback that we get from the people that we see every day. So if you want to see a presentation about it, we'll definitely go more in depth in vegetarian, vegan diets over time too. We just want to get your interest and have a good time. All right, guys, thank you. Have a great rest of your day.